Hello y'all and welcome back. So this video is the first video in a series of 6 videos that examine the concept of God's existence. And the aim of these videos is to present as concise as possible an argument while still addressing obvious objections. But the goal is to keep these under 7 minutes long. So they're going to be concise, they're going to be a little more tightly scripted than my ordinary videos. But hopefully it can provide a nice kind of compilation of arguments for God's existence without taking too much of your valuable time. So we can begin here. So in this video, I'm going to argue that God exists. Now, first we need to define our terms. By God, I mean a perfectly omnipotent, omniscient, and morally perfect being. And the first thing to note is that this concept is a coherent one. We know what it is to be able to do something. Well, God can do everything. We know what it is to know something. Well, God knows everything. We know what it is to do right and to do wrong. Well, God does only right and no wrong. Now, to claim that we understand these concepts is not to claim that we fully comprehend them, but you don't need to comprehend a thing in order for it to be coherent. None of us can get our head around the concept of a million. That concept is simply too large, but we use it all the time. Here, too, we can acknowledge the concepts of omniscience, omnipotence, and moral perfection, and acknowledge that they're coherent even though we don't fully grasp them. So the notion of God, at least this minimal notion, is coherent. So does God exist? Well, I believe the answer is yes. And the main reason that I personally believe God exists is the existence of the universe. Where did the universe come from? Now, there are many answers to this question. One popular answer is the Big Bang. But the Big Bang Theory is a space-time model in which the universe had a beginning, and this is precisely what the theist claims, that the universe began to exist when God created it. So in order to provide an alternate to theism, you'd need an atheistic Big Bang Theory. Well, what does this theory look like? On this theory, nothing causes the universe. The Big Bang is preceded by nothing at all. In other words, the entire universe popped into being uncaused out of nothing. But this sounds altogether too much like magic. It sounds like the kind of thing you'd say if you had no answer at all. And curiously here, what many atheists do is they acquiesce. They say they have no answer, but they argue that any answer, even a non-answer, is better than believing in the invisible man in the sky. This, they claim, is simply too far-fetched. Even no cause is better than that. They say the theist is simply positing what's known as a God of the gaps. We can't explain the universe, so we posit this imaginary man who did it. Now, is this true? Are we simply at a stalemate? Do some people find God more plausible and some people find no argument more plausible, and that's the end of it? Well, I don't think so. I think we have a tiebreaker for this stalemate. In fact, I think we have 3. Here are 3 reasons why the atheistic Big Bang Theory doesn't work. Reason number 1. Out of nothing, nothing comes. No matter how many times you multiply or add 0, you're still going to have just 0. You can't generate the tiniest fraction. But as in mathematics, so in the physical world, things have causes. This is closely related to the second reason, which is that things just don't do that. Imagine for a moment a world where things popped into and out of existence uncaused out of nothing. It would be inexpressibly terrifying and utterly unlivable. Brick walls would materialize in front of your car on the freeway, smashing you to smithereens. The chair and the floor you're sitting on would disappear, leaving you falling through thin air. Enormous monsters would appear and swallow you whole. Does this sound far-fetched? It is far-fetched. It's tremendously far-fetched. But that's a problem for the atheistic view. You see, the only reason we can say with any certainty that a thing is far-fetched is because we possess scientific knowledge of that thing's nature, and we know from scientific precedents how it will behave. But on this view, things have no natures. They have no fixed being at all. They don't exist. They pop into and out of being willy-nilly with no causes. Never in human history has anything ever been observed to have done this. Yet the atheist's claim is not simply that something could do it, but that everything, literally everything, did do it. Third, it's a violation of the principle of sufficient reason. So all science, medicine, technology, indeed all of human thought rests on the principle of sufficient reason. There are many formulations of this principle, but my favorite is this. Every existing thing has an explanation for its existence. Now, imagine for a moment if this weren't true. If phenomena really could have not an elusive explanation or a complex explanation, but no explanation at all. Science would grind to a halt. Everyone searching for any kind of cure or causal source or explanation of any kind would be haunted by the fear that what they were after simply did not exist. that the phenomenon they were seeking to understand had no cause. But science proceeds apace. Why? Because we know at the core of our being that things have coherent explanations, and the atheistic Big Bang theory simply denies this. But what caused God? If every existing thing has an explanation for its existence, then God must as well. That's true. Here, the answer is that the explanation for God's existence is the necessity of God's own nature. God, by definition, is a perfect being, and a perfect being exists in the most perfect way possible, that is, through the necessity of its nature. You may believe in such a being, or you may disbelieve in such a being, but the notion is not assembled for the purpose of the argument. It is central to the definition of the being in question. Fine, the atheist might say, two can play this game. I'll claim the universe is a necessary existent as well. But unfortunately, you can't do this and adopt the Big Bang Theory. You see, the Big Bang Theory claims that the universe was not eternal, that it had a beginning, and the Big Bang Theory is still our best science. Now here, the atheist may return to the original point. All this may be true, but the idea of a big man in the sky who made everything is just too far-fetched. It's a fairy tale, a coping mechanism for a pre-scientific people. But it's important here not to get hung up on anthropomorphic imagery. Nowhere does my argument claim that God is a man. I have held off from using gendered language throughout this argument. I simply claim that God, a perfect being, exists, and my grounds for holding this is the existence of the universe. So I make my decisions based on logic and sound reasoning, or I like to at least try to do that. If at any point I'm asked to turn off my mind and simply to assume something, I refuse. And the atheistic Big Bang Theory tells me to turn off my mind, to accept the universe as a wholly uncaused entity with no explanation whatsoever, I refuse. Now, this notion of God that I adopt may still seem implausible to the atheist, I realize that, but many smart people throughout history have believed in this concept, and it's no secret why. Its explanatory power is enormous. Now, I don't say anything here about religion. Religion has to do with sacred texts and sacred spaces and holy men and ritual. Nothing could be further from the subject of this video, but I do claim that God exists, and I believe that the argument I present here offers conclusive proof that this is so. Thank you.